My name is Katherine Gentile, and I am a WIN coach, and I am also an instructor at Columbia University. I've been coaching and leading workshops with WIN for about 4 years now, and I have to say I love it. I love the women that I've met through WIN, and I've been leading the WIN Summit workshops for 4 years, and this is my first time in person, and it feels so good to see everyone. I'm used to seeing all your faces on these tiny little screens and scrolling, so it's so refreshing to have everyone here today. So at Columbia, I teach conflict resolution and negotiation, and what I do is I apply those theories and concepts to WIN, Women in Negotiation, and see how I can help you. So does anyone have any questions before I get started? Okay, great. So this is a pretty interactive workshop. I like to get you thinking and talking, so. Can you still hear me? Is it still are we doing the microphone? I'm trying to avoid it. I'm not loud enough on my own. A lot of stuff going on over here. Okay, so I hope I don't confuse the microphone and my clicker. I'm going to do my best. Okay, so where was I? Does anybody have any questions before we get started? No? Okay. So this workshop is called Stepping into Your Power, and we are focusing on imposter syndrome. Can I see a show of hands if anyone has experienced that, knows the term, understands it? Pretty much everyone, right? If you don't, we're going to define it later, and we're going to do a deep dive into it. So the reason why this workshop is called Stepping into Your Power is because we really want to focus on women's empowerment. However, before we do that, we're going to have to step into our vulnerabilities first and try to understand why we need the empowerment in the first place. What is holding us back, right? So let's dive right into it. This is our agenda. We are going to explore how and if imposter syndrome has impacted us personally. Then we're going to move on to the impact of gender on imposter syndrome. And that's a really fun one because I took it upon myself to do a little survey with the men in my network with a very broad range of ages. And the answers that I got were actually surprising and fascinating and very varied. So I would also like to ask you a couple of questions about that as well. And then finally, the third part, we're going to introduce strategies to counteract imposter syndrome and navigate alternative mindsets and mantras to know your worth. All right, does that sound good? We're all ready? Okay, so before we go in, I really just want your first instinct to this question. Do you equate competence with perfection? So think about that for a second. Feel free to raise your hand. Do you equate competence with perfection? And how does that lead to our success? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Anyone? Don't make me call on you. I know some of you. Yeah.
I feel like I do equate it, and I didn't realize it till now. And I think a lot of it comes from childhood where we're pushed for the grades, and it was like A or bust. So to me, a perfect report card was success. So that just is how I've continued carrying my desire for perfection into adulthood.
Great. Okay. Does anybody else share that point of view? When we were growing up, we had to be perfect. Yes, over here.
Likes to know like how the sausage is made. I don't just need to know like the peripheral at work, and I want to completely understand it before I feel like I can speak to something. So I've had to get more comfortable in like a little bit of ambiguity, and just being able to kind of fake it till you make it. But I don't do very well in that space.
That's fascinating. I love that answer. These are two really good answers, and our need, particularly as women, to be perfect, and how we're not necessarily comfortable with those ambiguities, and just being competent isn't enough. Whereas I actually interviewed my brother about this, and I asked him, if your work ethics had to be the title of a book, what would it be? And his title would be Minimal Effort, Maximum Results. And let me tell you, he is not a very stressed out person. For he should be studied, actually, because I'm sure not all men share that. But he has just coasted through life, graduated with a 1.8 average, and just now is an incredibly successful lawyer. So who knew, right? And he got by life just being competent, right? So I'm not saying that we should put aside that need for perfection, because I think that need for perfection does fuel us. But what if it cripples us? So I want you to think about that for a moment, about competence and success. So I'm going to turn this over to you for a second. Introduce yourself to your neighbor, and I want you to just discuss imposter syndrome. And if you've ever experienced it, maybe you don't know what it is. Maybe you have experienced it, but you never really had a definition for it. So we're going to take 3 to 5 minutes right now, meet your neighbor, and then we're going to reconvene. And I might ask some of you to share some of your stories about imposter syndrome. So go for it. Introduce yourselves. You could be in groups of 3. I know we could probably talk about this all day, right? So, did anybody realize anything in their conversation about imposter syndrome? Realize anything about yourself? Does anyone want to share your experience? I know it might be hard. Yeah, over here, great. Hang on, I'm gonna give you the mic.
So for one, I am sitting next to a gem right here. So she's given me goosebumps, chills, and actually talked through an exercise to do. And so I talked about my coping mechanism with imposter syndrome, which was kind of working on my self-talk, but it was more structured. And I would like for you to share that.
We have some wisdom over here.
Yes, we do.
I teach too. Having been brought up to be an imposter, I finally got to the point where I started to say, all right, go sit over there. I have to be a grown-up. I love you. You taught me empathy. You taught me caring. You've given me so much. I can't live without you, but I can't live with you right now. Go sit over there. I'll come back. I'll get you. No one will hurt you. You'll be okay. And then I go, be me.
And it's over. We're done. We learned everything we need to know. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we all heard that, right? We had to put it aside. Thank you. I acknowledge you. Those negative thoughts are serving a purpose, but I don't need you right now. I have to do some work, right? I don't need you right now. That's fantastic. Does anybody else want to share something? Over here, yeah.
So I was thinking about some of the questions that you had up, and I think that I would answer them differently personally than if I was giving advice to someone else, which I think is really interesting. In that as a leader, I wouldn't take the same advice that I give to somebody else. So why are we so much harder on ourselves, and why do we not take the same advice that we would give another woman that works for us? So that was really interesting for me to think about how I would respond if somebody gave me the same answer that I would give myself.
Yeah. We are kinder to others than we are to ourselves. Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, I was definitely experiencing imposter syndrome putting together this workshop on imposter syndrome. Because it's natural and it's normal. And I like the fact that we're sharing this. When we discuss strategies later, the first step is really normalizing it. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm really happy that we had this conversation because we're unleashing it. And we're allowing ourselves to be human and feel these feelings, right? It's just how do we manage these feelings that is the question. Does anybody else want to share anything? Yeah? Okay. In the pink.
And I just realized this from talking to Amanda, but when she started talking, her imposter syndrome was about where she is now, whereas mine was before the project started. Like, I almost declined the project because I didn't think I was capable, whereas she more associates it with, I can't believe where I am now. So there's two different ways to look at it.
That's perfect, the before and the after, right? How do we become outcome focused? And we say that a lot in conflict resolution, outcome focused. What outcome do we want to see from this project or task that we're taking on? Very good. You guys are just giving me so many wonderful thoughts. I love it. So these are some common imposter syndrome thoughts. I got this job because I am lucky. Anyone feel that way? Show of hands. Yeah. I am not qualified for this job or this task. Show of hands. Yep. People think I am capable, but I'm not. Anyone? Yeah. So we've all experienced these thoughts from time to time, not every time. Sometimes, a task could be something we've done and we're bored. But what does that tell us? That we kind of need these challenges to fuel us, right? So when I compiled these slides, I looked at the first ever paper on imposter syndrome, and it was written in 1978. Does that surprise anyone? It shocked me, because that's the year I was born, to think that it's almost half a century old. And I have to be honest, I haven't really heard the term prior to 10 years before now. I would say it's a pretty common term that I hear a lot lately. But when I was in my 20s, I really didn't hear that at all. So this is the original paper by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Ament-Imes. An imposter phenomenon designates an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. Now, the idea of phoniness is something that I want to tackle here, because what makes us a phony? Are we all phonies at some point, just because we're trying something new, right? So we really want to dig into this and try and normalize it as best we can. Excuse me. So I want you to take a look at these two different thought processes. We have when I make a mistake, or when I fail, or when I succeed. And I want you to think of these two thoughts on two ends of the same continuum, failure and success. And I wanted you to take a look at the imposter syndrome thoughts that lead to these, right? For the failure, it is due to my being naturally inept. I don't have what it takes to succeed. I never had the skills in the first place. And if you take a look at the success, you say it was luck, right? I don't deserve to be here. What if I fail? So if you think about these two results, success and failure, with imposter syndrome, we have both negative thoughts feeding into that. So for success, I want you to acknowledge these imposter syndrome thoughts. It was luck. I don't deserve them. But I want it to be balanced out with some positive thoughts as well, because we deserve it. We deserve to feel good about ourselves if we succeed, right? If we fail, these are motivating thoughts. We'll take it, but we don't want it to cripple us. We don't want it to cripple our productivity. And also, I put this slide up here because I wanted to showcase a reinforcing feedback loop. There are some good things about imposter syndrome. I know it feels gross and it's a horrible feeling and it really does hold us back sometimes. But if you think about it, imposter syndrome is fear-based. And fear is a very good motivator. I wish it wasn't, but it is. So what happens here is we feel like an imposter, and it motivates us to try harder, which brings us more success, which then leads us to more thoughts of imposter syndrome, right? So this is what we call a reinforcing feedback loop, and it's how we survive, it's how we grow, and it's how we adapt to new challenges. So what I want you to take from this, particularly this slide, is that we do want to be motivated, but we want to minus the fear. Right? We want to acknowledge the fear, accept that it's there, right? But then say, I don't want this fear to inhibit me from moving forward with my task. And this is what we don't say. I mean, why don't we say this? I am allowing time for progress and growth. Simple. The expectation is not to be perfect on day one. When I first started teaching, I gave the worst lessons in the world. I had a 4-hour lecture in front of me, and I literally blew through all my knowledge in 15 minutes. And on my break, I was like, how am I going to teach these kids? How am I going to teach them? I have nothing left, right? If I make a mistake, I will learn from it and move forward from there. Smart, kind to ourselves, balanced. Each step up the ladder is a journey. Now this is the fun part. We're going to think about gender and imposter syndrome. So, what are your thoughts on this? Do men experience imposter syndrome? What do you think? Do they?
My initial thought was no, but I think anyone who's put in a position that they've never done before must experience it on some level. I just think it's less prevalent.
I also think men have an expectation of strength that forces them, I think, sometimes to internalize a lot of what women share with each other, which would make me think that they have imposter syndrome as well.
Yes, absolutely. Does anybody else have any thoughts on imposter syndrome for men? No? So we don't have any men in the room, do we? Except for the person videoing me. No one to ask. My lovely mic guy left. I was going to put him on the spot, but he probably saw that coming and he left. So here are, if you Google it, I Googled it, I'm not going to lie, you get a lot of charts, and I love charts. I'm a Virgo, love charts. So these are survey responses to the statement, I think most people at the University of Michigan are smarter than me. Okay, so these are students that are currently there. And if you take a look at the female, which is in red, you can't really tell here, most of them strongly agree with that statement. However, if you look at the male, most of them disagree with that. They think they deserve to be there. But the one thing that I thought was really great about this graphic is if you look right here, most of us are neutral. Neutral is good. Neutral is complex. Neutral is balanced. It means you're weighing your thoughts. It means sometimes I feel like I belong here, but I took this one class and I wasn't really sure. I wasn't really sure if I could make it in that class. So what do you do from there? Do you accept the challenge? Do you drop out? Right? Neutral is good with conflict because it means you're weighing options. And with imposter syndrome, I want to point this out. Imposter syndrome is an intrapersonal conflict, which means it's a conflict within yourself. So we use in the conflict resolution field the same strategies for social conflict, international conflict, with intrapersonal conflict. It's very fascinating. So here we go. Do men experience it? That first paper that was written in 1978, it was really thought to be a female condition, right? But now that we discover it more, men actually do experience it. But just like stated in this table over here, they do observe imposter syndrome in a different way. And they definitely have different challenges and different mindsets than we do. Because believe it or not, there is a big difference between men and women. But they definitely experience imposter syndrome differently. So I took it upon myself to do a survey amongst my network of family, friends, acquaintances. I got a very different response from all of them. So I want to highlight the top right corner. If you look over here, we have the 55-year-old man. I have to say, men in their 50s, how do I say this nicely? I'm going to turn it nice. It's a little toxic. It's a little toxic masculinity going on there. So can someone read this for me really loud? Here, I'm going to have you read that. What did our 55-year-old man say?
Of course men feel that way. Men aren't allowed to let self-doubt get in the way of doing our jobs. If you do, you're considered weak.
They're so strong. they're not, and you should have heard the way he said it. Like, we're not allowed. We can't do it. It was so funny. And this was actually like a conversation that I had with a bunch of men in that age group. And it was fascinating. So this is how I'm turning it a little nice towards our lovely male counterparts. So if you think about these men, they were born in the 60s. In the 60s, if they felt any vulnerability or if they tripped and fell, these little boys, they were told to get up and act like a man. So they weren't allowed to have these vulnerable emotions. So we do need to show a little compassion for them. The 33-year-old over here, I said I take medication, which I think is really good. The reason why I pointed this one out, because that shows growth. That means to me that the 33-year-old said, I do feel vulnerable, and I don't feel like I can handle these, and I'm using this to cope. So to me, that's a pretty healthy response. And I want to point out the 79 and 34-year-old. If you take a look at this, the 34-year-old said, no, I would say I don't experience those feelings or they don't apply to me. I do feel pressure to do a good job, but I never thought that I tricked people to be there, right? Now look at the 79-year-old. I would feel insecure about the work I would have to do, but I always felt deserving. I could be looking through a filter of many years. Now that's a very successful man in his 70s. And what was really interesting was the 79-year-old and the 34-year-old are father and son. And I interviewed them separately. They had no idea that I was interviewing them. And the reason why I put that there is I want you all to think, how did our family model behaviors about imposter syndrome to us? I thought it was really touching that these two had an almost identical mindset, having never discussed it before. So just take note of that. Think of your own personal life and your family and your peers, and just ask yourself, what messages was I getting from them about success, right? Okay, so let's move on to the 46-year-old and the 47-year-old. The 46-year-old is the biggest narcissist I've ever met. And I love him. He's lovely. He's a narcissist. So he said, and this shocked me, because I was trying to find someone that was like, I have never felt it in my life. Are you kidding me? He said it used to bother me, but not so much anymore. I got used to climbing up the ladder and the challenges that came with it. How healthy and balanced. But the fact that he had felt any vulnerability was shocking to me, because I went through the slides and he was like, yep, felt all those feelings, yep. And then we have the 47-year-old. I try to be objective and keep track of successes and failures. So what can we take from this? If we are to be assertive in our careers, sometimes that can come off in a negative light to our peers. And that's always something to be mindful of. And I'm always hesitant to bring up topics like this because it bothers me that women are going to workshops like this and trying to figure out how to fit in the workplace, and men, by and large, aren't trying to figure out how women fit into the workplace. But I do think we can learn from this, because in a way, this is some healthy behavior, and I give them credit for it. Hate to admit it, but I do. So with that 46-year-old who is keeping objective, we delved into a conversation about it. And I also found out something that was pretty interesting. How many of you have applied for a position that you felt like you didn't have the credentials for? Yep. Okay, quite a few. That's not the norm. Because by and large, women will only apply for a position that they are 100% qualified for. So think about this for a second. Men do not. Men often apply for positions that they don't have any credentials for, or at least lack a lot of the credentials. So if you've created the pattern of taking on tasks that you actually don't have the credentials for, whereas we have women that are 100% qualified for their positions and are underpaid for those positions. And on top of that, we feel imposter syndrome, like we're not worthy of the positions, when in fact we're overqualified. Right? So I saw us going in these two directions. And believe it or not, the narcissist had the most insight about it. So it was a very valuable conversation. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. That is perfect. What do? We're back into the strategies section. Number one, we define it. Now, one thing that's very encouraging about imposter syndrome is that when this paper was written in 1978, people were very embarrassed to admit that they had it. But now, people are talking about it. I'm hearing about it from all of my clients, almost every single one of them. My sister's 30 years old. Every single one of her friends are talking about imposter syndrome and how it's holding them back. So talk about it. Make it normal, right? We have to spread the word about it and make sure that we're there for each other. And part 2, I guess, discuss the problem, right? We want to unleash it. It's define and discuss, sorry. You want to unleash the problem. So if you are a manager or a director and you've just promoted someone on your team, talk to them about imposter syndrome, right? Be a leader. Let them know that it's normal to feel that way. Chances are they're going to say, no, I'm fine. I'm ready for this. I feel like it's okay, but they might not be telling you the truth. It doesn't matter. As long as you're telling them, I am here for you. When I was in your position, I didn't know what I was doing. I was quiet in meetings. I didn't feel comfortable speaking out. Just so you know, I'm here for you, and if you ever want to talk about it, good. And this goes both ways, right? I have some clients who were promoted, and they went to a team that were far more knowledgeable about what they had to do than she was. So if you get a boss or a director that was just promoted and they need a little catch-up time, talk to them about it. Fill them in. Let them know that there's something that they can do about it, right? So this is important right here. This is our self-talk. We have to find mantras that are realistic and that work. We want to retrain the brain to predict success, not failure. Remember when I talked about that continuum? We want to think about our future successes. Yes, you can take a picture of this, absolutely. We want to manifest positive outcomes, redefine failure as growth. Now we hear this. I'm sure this isn't the first time you've all heard of this, but we actually must practice it in order to overcome it. So we are going to take now 5 minutes. You all have a worksheet, and each one of these prompts there is on the paper, and I would like you all to do one of these prompts. Fill it in, and I want you to think about empowerment, right? I want you to think about a time where you were doing a job. It could have been your 8th grade piano recital. I don't care what it was. Where you felt at ease, you were 100% prepared. All the factors for your success were in place. Write it down and reflect on it. So take a moment and fill in something. You can do any one of these up here. My favorite is what is unique about you that leads to your happiest times and best performances. So what I'm hearing now is you had 2 strong, confident, powerful women talking with you, right? So they were empowering you in that moment. Those are good leaders, right? As a director or a CFO, a CEO, you want someone that leads through empowerment. We call it coactive power. Power, I could talk about it forever because I did a lot of research on it. It is always fluid. It is never in a fixed state. And we always benefit, even if we are in the biggest conflict with someone else, by empowering the other person. It takes a lot of emotional management to do so, but truly empowering the other person, if you just hear, what's your name again? Margaret, what Margaret just said, how good that made her feel in a job interview, which is a pretty stressful situation. I mean, you can't ask for better than that, so that's great. Would anyone else like to share? Over here?
I was going to do the other question about what is unique about you.
Great.
Thank you. I think for me, it's taken a while, but I think your energy level in speaking reading the room has been something that's been an art and a science for me for the last couple of years. But I think it's knowing when to push a little, when to hold back, when to be quiet, leading by example. I think for me, it's not about you shining. It's about letting your team or whomever is your peer have the opportunity to be able to express their skill set as well. So it's sort of that unselfish attitude going into a big presentation or a big initiative, and being sensitive to the situation, just knowing if it's a senior audience versus a more technical audience, just knowing how to read that room.
I'm loving how everyone is feeling empowered or their best selves when they are empowering others. Such a breakthrough. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to? Over here, I'm getting a workout.
I'm Haley, and so I answered the question of reflecting on a time at home, or so in my case at home, when I felt like I was acting in a way that was natural and light. And so I was talking about cooking at home with my mom. We literally move around the kitchen like it's a dance, supporting each other and balancing each other out. No, I'm not, but you would think I am. And it's like a dance, like without even needing to speak. And so I really think about how I can repeat that behavior today. And it's drawing support from my environment, but adding my own ingredients and my own flair, and knowing that if I fail, I can pivot, I can do something different, and it might end up actually being greater than what I had set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, if we're in a supportive atmosphere, right, we thrive, even if we fall. We thrive if we fall. Perfect. So great. Thank you so much. Over here.
Hello. I answered the question, what is unique about me that leads to my happiest times? And I'm a fashion designer, so my ability to create beautiful designs and help women just transform their confidence and perspective or perception of themselves truly makes me happy. And as far as I'm happy is when I am able to bring concepts to life that just started as a thought.
That's amazing. So you're a creative. You feel best when you're creating. And once again, when we are creating, we are serving others as much as we are serving ourselves. This was wonderful. Thank you. Oh, over here. Yes. One more.
I think what's unique about me that leads to my happiest times and best performances is that I genuinely love people and figuring out what makes them tick. And that can only happen if you care about them. And I realize that that's really important to me. So I can't have any superficial relationships. I have to know people. And I love bringing people out of their shells too. I feel like people hold the answers. People bring their best selves to work, but sometimes they need permission, sometimes they need prompts, sometimes they need encouragement, or sometimes they need you to be vulnerable first. So that's what fuels me, and I'm an emotional radar, and I love to just understand people's moods, and I think that just makes me happy when I can impact people and really get to know them.
And to work and be able to do that as well. Great. So I love people, and I am at my best when I am empowering other people. It all has to do with empowerment here. So the more we spread it, the more we get in return. So number 4, we want to change our mindset. So this is stepping into our power right now. So we use the mantras that are helpful, right? I am going to do well on this project. That's step number 2. Step number 4, we want to address the fear, and we want to be specific about the fear, right? So if the feeling is I'm feeling so insecure about this new role, I think I'm going to fail, and it's crippling me. I have so much anxiety and stress. I'm not sleeping. What does that do? It hurts us. But we have to let it not hurt us, just let it inform us. So when we are feeling fear, we want to reflect on what the opposite of fear is. And that, again, is empowerment. So if you do say to yourself, I'm feeling insecure right now, say yes, accept it, and just like my lovely lady over here said, go to the corner, right? Step aside. What do you want to feel? I want to feel valued. I want to feel respected in this job. I want to feel comfortable. I want to feel worthwhile. Think of empowering thoughts to flip that mindset. Use the fear, let it inform you, and then choose the opposite of fear with empowerment and then move forward. It takes a lot of emotional discipline to do this. And finally, manifest. Envision your success story, where you want to be. Be big, be bold, you deserve it. About 17 years ago, I was in a really bad place. I was in a horrendous relationship, an awful job, and I hated where I lived. I hated everything. And my family knew this because I was so miserable. They gave me every single self-help book there was, like all the cheesy ones, The Secret, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. They're actually really good books. And I started manifesting because I had no other choice. I didn't want to accept miserable. My self-talk back then was literally, good things don't happen to me. So I started doing this. I broke through the walls. I literally remember having to punch through walls with positive thoughts of where I wanted to be, and I finally got there, got out of that relationship. I went back to school, quit my job, and I woke up this morning thinking about this lecture of where I am now compared to where I was then. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those cheesy books and the manifesting. I promise you that. So if you can just take 1 minute every day and manifest something big and bold that you want for yourself, I promise you, you will have an impact. It might not be the next day, but in a year's time, you will definitely see some changes. And finally, what if you fail? What does it tell us? That we were right, we were awful? That we didn't deserve the success that we got? Absolutely not. It tells us that we took a risk, we accepted a challenge, made some mistakes along the way, and we are going to learn from our mistakes, and that is all. Put the fear aside. Now, I don't have much time left, but I just want to leave you with this. That's my conclusion page. I actually have a handout of all of these, so I will hand those out to you as you leave. This is Amy Cuddy. She is a social psychologist. She has written some amazing books. I'm sure some of you have heard of her. New situations may stoke old fears. Future sensations of inadequacy might reawaken long forgotten insecurities. But the more we are aware of our anxieties, the more we communicate about them, and the smarter we are about how they operate, the easier they'll be to shrug off the next time they pop up. Every single person in this room deserves success. You're all a really big deal, I promise you. I got emotional saying that. But more importantly, not only do you deserve success, but you deserve to feel good about your success. So let's just end this on a positive note. And that is all for me today, unless any of you have any questions. Thank you so much for being here. And I really value your time. Thank you.